Hey everybody, this is Dr. Chris Dost. Welcome back to my Biblical Greek channel. We are beginning Unit 2 now, and in Unit 2 we're going to focus on present tense verbs. And so today we're going to get started real slow with present tense verbs in the active voice, and I'll explain what that means in another lesson, but for now, let me just state what we're doing and we'll explain it later. Present tense verbs, active voice in the indicative mood. And don't worry about the term indicative mood. I will explain that in a later lesson. But the goal of this lesson is to have a look at just four very common verbs, four verbs that appear regularly in the present tense, active voice, indicative mood in the New Testament, and we'll look at lots of examples. Before we begin, however, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell to be notified when I publish future lessons in this video series, and please be sure to hit that like button and tell your friends about this channel. I really appreciate the support, and I just want to thank all of the listeners for helping me get to 1,000 subscribers. All right, let's get started, everybody. So the first present tense verb that we're going to learn today is the verb lege. Now, if you're watching this video, I assume that you are new to Greek, so it's going to be important that we first identify the letters just to help you read and pronounce properly. So the five letters that we see here are lambda, epsilon, gamma, epsilon, iota. And notice that the first epsilon has an acute accent mark, so we're going to put the stress on that when we say this word lege rather than lege. Okay, so it'll be lege on the first syllable. The other thing to remember is that the epsilon and iota in Greek form a diphthong, and that means it's two vowels producing one sound. And so that's why this word is only two syllables. Lege. Lege. And so the epsilon iota together make the same sound as the E and I in the spelling of the number 8 in English. 8. Lege. And that means he says or she says. And you'll just notice on the left, rather than writing both he and she every time, I just put the S in parentheses. And so when you see this, it means he says or she says. It can mean both. Okay, the second verb that we're going to learn today is the verb lale. Lale. And that means he speaks or she speaks. And we only know whether it's supposed to be he or she depending on the context. It can also mean it speaks as well. Lale. The third one, meaning he has, she has, or it has, is eche. Eche. And so notice that the stress falls on the first syllable. And then finally, we have the verb poie. 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 And that word has two diphthongs, right? It has the omicron and the iota, making oi, like in oil, and the epsilon and the iota, making a, like in eight. Poie. And that means he does, he makes, she does, she makes, it does, it makes. You get the idea. Okay, so the four words that we're working on today are lege, lege, lale, lale, eche, eche, and poie, poie. All right, so let's look at some examples of lege. He says, she says, it says. All right, the first one I want to go over here comes from Revelation 22:20. Now, I'm not giving you the whole verse. We're just working on a few words. Now, I want you to pause the recording and see if you can pronounce this text. And I assume that you're going to make some mistakes at this point because remember, you're new to Greek and you're still, even though we've gone through the alphabet already, you're still learning the alphabet. And so be kind to yourself and just take your time and do your best to pronounce it. And then once you've tried to do that, unpause the recording and I'll pronounce it for you. All right, go ahead. So the pronunciation is lege ha marturon. Lege ha marturon. Lege ha marturon. Lege, notice there's a an uncial or capital lambda there, means he says, she says, or it says. Now, we don't know yet which one it'll be because we need context to help us. But ha marturon means the witness. The witness. It kind of looks like the English word martyr, but it means the witness. Now, one of the things that I may have pointed out when we were learning some of our Greek sorry, I can't talk today, can't speak English. When we were learning some of our Greek vocabulary is that the word ha often means the, and it's a masculine form. And so that tells us that the verb is going to be he says. So who says? The witness says. Now notice that Greek tolerates inverted word order. In English, if we were to produce a super wooden translation, says the witness, yeah, people understand it, but it sounds kind of like archaic or awkward speech. And so we have to flip the word order here if we're translating into modern English. The witness says. The witness says. Revelation 2:20. All right, next. Revelation 18:7. In that verse, we have the following clause. And again, go ahead and try to pronounce it yourself. Pause the recording and do your best to pronounce every word as correctly as you can. En te cardia autes lege. En te cardia autes lege. So we see the word lege at the end of the clause, and again, it's going to mean he says, she says, it says. So we have to look at the context. Now, let's look at the other words that we have here. We've learned already in previous lessons that en is a preposition meaning in. It often means in. It has other meanings, but it means in, and that's what it means here. Te cardia means in the heart. In the heart. And autes means her. So in her heart, therefore we're going to assume that lege means she says. She says in her heart. She says in her heart. En te cardia autes lege. All right, next, in Revelation 14:13, we have, and again, I want you to pause the recording, try to do this yourself. You get the idea. It says, Nai lege ta pneuma. Nai lege ta pneuma. Nai can mean yes or indeed, and notice that we have the alpha and the iota forming a diphthong, which makes the sound I. Nai lege, indeed, he says, she says, it says. We don't know what lege means until we find the subject of the sentence. And it so happens that ta pneuma is the subject, and it means the Spirit. Ta pneuma. So, indeed the Spirit says, indeed the Spirit says, nai lege ta pneuma. In Romans 10:20, we have Esaias. Notice that the alpha and the iota don't form a diphthong there, and that's because of the umlauts over the iota. That separates them, so we don't read them as a diphthong. Esaias de lege. Esaias de lege. I put the 3 ellipsis dots in because I'm leaving words out that are there in the verse. And this is going to be translated, but Isaiah says, but Isaiah says. Esaias is Isaiah, that's the subject. De means but, and lege means says. Esaias de lege, but Isaiah says. Now, I said that we were dealing with present tense verbs, but it's important to remember that sometimes in English we use the present tense to talk about a past event. We call this the historical present. So when you're relating a story to someone of something that happened in the past, and you want to bring the listener into the story as if they're reliving it with you, you might use the present tense so they understand from the context that the situation you're describing happened in the past. And that happens here in Revelation 17:15, where, again, we can't get into all the context, but here, lege is not going to be translated he says, it will be he said. Kai lege moi, and he says to me, and he said to me. So the only way we know when a present tense verb is to be translated with the English past tense is by context. And because in this video we don't have time to go through all of the context, you'll just have to take my word for it for now. We'll get into this in more detail some other time. But in this case, kai lege moi means, and he said to me, and he said to me. We see a similar example in Matthew 4:10, where it says, tote lege auto ha Jesus, tote lege auto ha Jesus. Now, tote means then, lege means he says, auto means to him, and the subject is ha Jesus, which, if you want to translate it in a wooden fashion, it means the Jesus. But, obviously, Greek uses the definite article here before names, whereas in English we would never do such a thing. So we're going to translate this, then Jesus said to him, past tense, then Jesus said to him, even though the verb in Greek is present tense. And the reason why we translate it in the past tense is simply because of the context. All right, now the next verb that we're going to look at is the verb lale, which means he speaks, she speaks, or it speaks. Lale. Our first example comes from Matthew 12:34, where it says, tostoma lale, and that means, if you're interested in watching this video in its entirety, please be sure to go to my website, www.learnbiblicallanguages.com, where for only $5 a month, you can have access to my entire Greek library, where all of my Greek videos are available unabridged. All right, we'll see you next time, everybody.